I know you're watching me.
Chinchilla.
Depot devoid.
Chinchilla.
Depot devoid.
Depot devoid.
Well,
Hey, Ted.
welcome back to another episode of Depot Devoid, where we're going to talk
Ted.
about... Oh, what's that?
Hey, Ted.
Huh?
I know you're watching me.
I know I should have a good response to that, because I watched this movie only one time, and I need to watch it 5 more before
Chinchilla.
Yes. It's great. I gotta watch it more before I get it, though.
So what I rudely interrupted was the explanation that here on Depot Devoid today, we will be discussing the 1989 avant-garde surreal sci-fi sexcapade, Dr. Caligari. And damn, I love this movie.
Did you know that it was actually put together in 1986, but it took 3 years to get it out?
I did not know that explicit detail, but I did notice that Fox Harris, the fellow who plays Dr. Aval, died in 1988, and the movie came out in 1989. So I knew there had to be some sort of time gap there.
Yeah, there is.
This, for those who don't know, which is probably everyone, this Dr. Caligari came to, it had a limited theatrical release in a few art houses. I don't really know what its theatrical performance was like. It came to me by way of the video store located inside my local Safeway grocery store when I was about 16 years old. And based on the picture on the box, I didn't care what was in the movie. I didn't care what it was about. I just saw that picture and I knew I needed to consume this thing. And I was right. This did not let me down. If you want to judge a book by its cover, you are welcome to do so, because it is so accurate. What is on the tin is exactly what is in the movie.
Unfortunately, I don't know what that looks like.
You can find the image online pretty easily. It's a shot of the actress Dr. Caligari standing in one of those sort of surrealist landscapes that the movie takes place in, with a doorway framed behind her and a weird looking straitjacket hanging in the doorway. It's like everything in this movie. It's not really the specific image that is so striking. It is the way that it is presented to you.
Everything that I'm seeing right now while I'm looking it up is just showing me the movie that it's a pseudo sequel to, or yeah, it's always trying to show me the cabinet of
Add a 1989 to your search term, and it should filter all that shit out. Yeah, so Ted has mentioned
that's perfect.
That this movie, Dr. Caligari, takes its title and very little else from a 1920 silent German expressionist movie called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is ostensibly about a guy using a somnambulist to commit a series of crimes. And then there's sort of flips around and it turns out that he is the director of an asylum, or maybe he's an inmate of an asylum. It takes pains to make you uncertain. But that movie is very, very visually striking, and it involves a lot of strangely shaped sets and stark contrasting light forms and silhouettes that are painted directly onto backdrops, so your eye gets kind of confused about what it's looking at. And this movie is also very surreal, but it's an avant-garde art movie. It's honestly like, it is all of the things that made the Republicans so horny to defund the National Endowment for the Arts in the 80s. Like, this movie is everything that their rage embodies. It's super sexual, it's aggressively weird, it looks strange, it sounds strange. Everything about it is like really off-putting if you are just there for like some down home typical entertainment. This is not what you're getting.
I know you're watching me.
No, it definitely is not. It's quite wonderfully twisted. And like when it first started out, I wasn't sure that I was going to be on board. And
I
it wanted
absolutely
me to
get that.
not be on board for the first 15 minutes of it. And then it was
And
like,
and
well,
those 15 minutes made your wife not be on board with it, as I
yeah,
recall. Is
well,
that
and
correct?
it was the first 4. And then we stopped it. I was like, well, I'll get back to this without you.
Nope.
Yeah, why don't you go do something else? So,
Totally understandable. This movie is not for everybody. It made a really strong impression on me when I was pretty young, but you were coming to it for the first time. Does it remind you of anything? Like what?
100% Saved by the Bell.
I will require some explanation.
All right. So the way that everything is put together on the sets with the angles and the weird triangles showing up, and even Pac-Man as the C for Dr. Caligari, everything about it was 100% Saved by the Bell.
The on-screen font for sure. Yes.
Yeah, except for when we would go into the miniatures that were a lot of the things that were panned away to. All of those was I didn't look into it, but it was put together and panned over by the camera in such a perfect way that it reminded me exactly of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Okay, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there. Yeah, for sure.
So Saved by the Bell meets Mystery Science Theater 3000 and some really creepy porn.
Okay, we should probably set the scene a little bit. So the way this movie presents itself to you, everything there is nothing on location in Dr. Caligari. Everything takes place on a soundstage in very controlled sets that are not making any attempt to seem realistic. They take place sort of in this dark void space, and everything, there are hardly any rooms even. There's just areas, that someone's house is represented by a gross landscape with some bubbling liquid in it, and an area of defined floor space with a piece of furniture on it. It's like you're watching a theater performance in one of those little black box theaters, and I assume that is all very, very deliberate. The artifice is part of the point. I I love the way that this movie makes no apologies for its use of this sense of playing pretend. Nothing is really real in this movie, and it makes the really weird sex stuff like it's very strange, and then it becomes funny.
It is. And when it starts out, so I started out back where I had began a couple weeks ago and really only had a couple moments to watch it. The opening sequence I'm not positive of, But where I started back into it was when she was getting banged by the baby doll faced man with dish gloves.
Sure, yeah.
So this is how this movie goes, everybody. Uh, and she's also standing behind herself while this is happening, looking at herself like, oh God, what's happening? While she is also getting screwed by the baby doll faced man with dish gloves and having a great time.
There is a recurring theme of voyeurism in Dr. Caligari, and it makes you, I think, aware to a certain extent of your position as a voyeur while you're watching the movie. And actually, it's okay. The movie starts with Mrs. Van Houten in her space, watching a TV and having what appears to be a bit of a breakdown. She's seeing things on TV happen in her real life. There's weird wounds appearing and disappearing. And all of this stuff transpires without any spoken dialogue for like 8 minutes. And the first time that we actually hear a spoken dialogue in the movie, when Mrs. Van Houten has gotten back to her chair in front of the television, and on the television appears a weird sexed up glam version of herself, which looks out into the room and says, I know you're watching me. It's like the first line of dialogue even is about voyeurism.
I know you're watching me. I feel your eyes like wet fingers touching me in special places.
And then she goes into another crazy fugue where she's getting dragged back to the asylum and witnesses herself being banged by the baby doll head.
There we go.
Which is how nervous breakdowns happened in the 80s. Things have changed a little bit.
Have they?
It's because we have opiates now.
They had them back then. Come on.
They were all Quaaludes back then, weren't they?
I know that you can get Quaaludes still, but I'm pretty sure that they're all from that era. I don't think
they're
they
just
make
in
them.
Somebody's drawer.
Yeah, I don't think they make them anymore. But what do I know about
I bet there's a brand name for them now. We just don't know that they're Quaaludes.
Some guy named Doug probably makes them in his basement. But I don't know. So my when she gets done getting banged by baby doll face man, dish glove hands, then she hangs out and masturbates to herself in the TV.
Yes.
And I had a hard time. All of those TV scenes, I had a real hard time hearing what she was saying.
Yeah, the dialogue of the sexed up glam version of Miss Van Houten on TV is like really electronically processed and hard to understand. Unfortunately, I've never seen a version of this with subtitled dialogue. And some of it I can understand, like I know you're watching me, and is it the glam version, or is it the part of her in real life that says, I feel your eyes like wet fingers touching me in special places?
That was the Mrs. Van Houten, not on the television.
Okay. I remember the dialogue, but I couldn't remember who said it.
Right. Honestly, I mean, there's a lot of dialogue that was hard for me to catch. And I do believe that I need to watch this movie 4 or 5 more times before
Everyone does.
Yeah, before I really get it. And yet at the same time, I don't know that I'm gonna have time to watch it that many more times. It's worth a watch. It's worth 5 watches. But holy crap, it is a giant mind fuck load of shit.
It is really freaking weird. The basic plot is Mrs. Van Houten has been to an insane asylum, and is now having a relapse of her diseased libido, and her severe nympholepsy, as is explained to us at one point.
Your wife has a disease of the libido.
There you go. Speak American.
She's completely out of control. My prognosis is 2 weeks in the asylum.
We've got a woman going back into the asylum. It's essentially Mrs. Van Houten's story. Like, she is there are a number of characters that we spend a lot of time with, but she's sort of our main character for like the first half of the movie, and then we start to share it a little bit more with Gus. But it's really about her relapse, and also the plots within the asylum to try to take down Dr. Caligari, because I guess maybe her experiments are a bit outside the purview of the traditional medical establishment.
Why, it's also so unbelievable.
She's no longer a research doctor. She's a flat-out sadist.
Not right perversion of medical laws, a sex Nazi.
That they are. Just a teensy. But not everybody quite gets that. And she's walking around there in her yellow outfit with her armored tits, you know.
The costumes are amazing.
They are.
Yeah, she has like this slick yellow outfit, and the breasts have these like hard, transparent, but not like super kind of frosty transparent like boob windows. It's crazy. It's got to be so much fun designing those outfits. Now, are you familiar with Repo Man?
I have seen it 1.2 times.
Okay. Because we meet in a scene here, like right here at the beginning, we meet Dr. Aval, who's the director of the asylum, and then his daughter Ramona and Ramona's husband, Dr. Lodger. They all work at the asylum. But Dr. Aval is played by Fox Harris, who most people will remember as the crazy dude driving the Chevy Malibu that is at the heart of everyone's adventures in the film Repo Man. And also from Repo Man, Jennifer Balgobin plays Emilio Estevez's ex-girlfriend, who forms a little punk gang and goes on a crime spree. That's Ramona here on Dr. Caligari. Fox Harris and Jennifer Balgobin have made at least 3 movies together that I know of, but I don't know if there's any significance to that or not. But yeah, they just keep showing up together.
They're buddies.
They are buddies. And Ramona and Adrian are basically there to try to get Dr. Aval to admit that Dr. Caligari has gone too far, and she's absolutely evil. And to make their point, they show him a woman with super long tits that are so long that they have to be held up by little clamps at the ends.
Aren't they pretty? Dr. Caligari made me a custom blend. Extra strength fatty tissue. It's the best.
The bad acting is so intentional. Everything about it, the disjointed clip, everything is meant to keep you wondering, why the fuck did you do this? And alternatively, why the fuck am I watching this?
Because it's amazing.
It is.
Because you
great.
have never seen anything like it. That's why.
I have too. I've seen Saved by the Bell, and I've seen Mystery Science Theater.
There are elements that remind you of that, but I defy you to find the episode of Saved by the Bell that has a story that reminds you of Dr. Caligari.
It probably all happened in Max's, where they were going
gestating in this weird Dayglow period at the beginning of the 1990s, as we're going from the 80s to the 90s. Like that's where Saved by the Bell is from too, and it's all steeped in this same weird
AC Slater
culture.
got some shit jacked into his pulmonary gland, and he just grew some big tits.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Inevitably to all of us.
And Jessica
Call
was
me
really
Babs.
weirded out.
Yeah, the tits. And okay, so just for plot purposes, this is what we're setting in motion. The kids want to bring Dr. Caligari down. Dr. Aval thinks that, her pioneering use of hormone interface therapy is funding all of their grants, so they can't really get rid of her. And maybe it's monstrous, but maybe it's just new. Are these patients monsters, or are they better off than they were before they got here? Maybe it's the appropriate approach for the woman with the really long tits. Maybe that's what she needed.
Yeah.
But Ramona vows to file a formal complaint.
And the Van Houtens, the wife is brought in for a 2-week stint there, and the husband freaks out after 2 days and comes in and insists upon seeing his wife. And then Dr. Caligari has him sit for coffee with him, in which, after asking if he wants 1 or 2 lumps of sugar, he says 2, and she drops 1 in, plus something that she'd already been palming in her hand that was a black lump of something and clearly not a sugar cube. And then he proceeds to eat or drink his coffee.
How does talking about your wife's orgasms make you feel?
Getting a little hot in here, or is it me?
I hadn't noticed. I don't suppose you have a problem you'd like to discuss.
Can you, open a window? I'm suffocating.
I'm beginning to get the impression you don't know how to satisfy your wife.
And then freaks out at the cake that is full of tentacle porn. And screams about being too hot and gets locked into a room.
Now, I think we might, however, have just skipped over the introduction of my personal favorite, Mr. Gus Pratt, who will form an important part of the climax of Dr. Caligari. Another inmate in the asylum, I think one of the only other males that we see, like at the beginning when we're establishing the asylum, it's really just a bunch of ladies and Gus. But he is a murderer, a cannibal, a generally all-around antisocial fellow who is an inmate receiving electroconvulsive therapy, which he really, really loves. And his dialogue, or monologues for the most part, in this movie were very, very precious to me as a teenager.
I like the tingle. Juice me, I'm a shiver boy. I got secret needles in my pokey globes.
You've implanted needles in your buttocks?
Pins and needle. The shiny kind. I'm riding a zillion happy boats.
I love that guy. He likes the tingle. Juice me, I'm a shiver boy.
It's so bad.
They have a great conversation about his past crimes. He monologues about some ladies that he's murdered and eaten.
She was actually 33, a kindergarten teacher at a home for wayward tots. I was a wayward tot, I told her, and then I smiled and said, "Surprise!" Cracked a bottle of ketchup, family size, right across her pretty wrinkled brow.
Love lurks in peculiar places. You put her in the pot?
Wearing her Sunday best. Carrots and peas and polka dots, taters and dumplings and beauty spots. That's the kind of girl I adore. Lip smacking good, Gracie galore.
He shows up in Star Trek: The Next Generation as a Cardassian a couple of times, and he's also in if you watch Doll Man. In the Full Moon collection, he has a role right at the beginning of that too.
I know you're watching me.
We also have a scene right before Eleanor goes into the asylum where we have the most impressive breakdown, where she flings the door open in her house, and behind the door is an undulating wall of flesh, with wounds and a big mouth with a huge tongue that she fillets for a while. She's like pretty into it.
And
I would probably call the asylum too.
Yeah, and there's some hole that's like puking out Tic Tacs or something.
I think it's maybe a mixture of strawberry jam and Necco wafers.
Maybe.
You remember Necco wafers?
Who doesn't? They can never forget the chalky
Horrible
flavor.
chalk tiddlywinks. Yeah, it's a really fucking weird scene, which is one of the images that just is in my head forever since I turned 16 and I saw this movie for the first time. I made Steve watch it immediately so that I would have someone to talk to about it. I'm not sure how much he liked it. But
That's
I mean,
all right.
he didn't hate it.
You know, since I'll probably have to watch it multiple times to get it, maybe when we actually start releasing this podcast, we can bring Steve on and have him be a resident.
Oh, yeah, that works. Because yeah, he would probably, I'm sure, at least remember me making him watch this.
It'll be good.
I mean, how could you not remember?
Yeah. It's not something that's going to be forgotten anytime soon. I tried starting watching this movie again today while Emily was getting out of the shower. I'm like, I'm gonna have to pause this. This is no.
It's like every time Bill gets up and I'm watching a Hellraiser movie and I immediately change it to something else.
Something nice. It's strawberry shortcake time.
Well, I mean, this movie is also like, it does feel like you're watching something kind of dirty, you know, like it's a fairly tame, really, you know, like you see a lot of Mrs. Van Houten's breasts at the beginning, and there's a lot of sexual, it's not sexy. It's not, it's sort of like, it's almost like a parody of eroticism. It's not erotic, but it sort of uses the language of eroticism to tell the story.
It's put together in such a way that everything about it requires anybody who walks in on you watching it to say, what the fuck are you doing?
Exactly. Oh yeah, for sure.
What is this nasty shit?
Yeah, there are certain scenes where you're like you would have to like really contextualize what was happening if someone walked in, or they would just assume that you were into some really twisted pornography. The Scarecrow.
Yeah.
Dr. Caligari makes Mrs. Van Houten well, she tells her that she has to get off a scarecrow while she watches, and then when she reaches into the scarecrow's pants, like it burns her arm and turns it into like a big flesh dildo.
But before that happens, she's reaching into his pants and says, I want his boy thing to twist it like a rubber band until it snaps.
It's so good. Oh my god. And then when we get to that part that you were talking about where she drugs Mr. Van Houten and he gets dragged off, immediately he finds himself disoriented in a cell where his wife comes up with her big flesh dildo arm that she's sporting now, and she erotomanias him right in the butt.
Which she did for him.
It's, yeah, I mean, maybe she's just showing him what she wants.
That's
clearly she is not being sufficiently satisfied by her husband,
as
about
Dr.
whom
Caligari
she said,
says,
my husband had an erection once. Silly, really. Now, immediately following the butt scene is one of my favorite bits, where we have Ramona and Adrian Lodger confront Dr. Caligari in her little Peanuts psychiatric help 5 cents booth, and it is like this most absurdly stylized verbal confrontation, which sort of feels like you're watching them sing a song, maybe. And it's I don't know how to describe it. We should probably play a clip, because it is weird and beautiful.
Enter. How can I be of assistance?
You can begin by removing yourself from the Van Houten case.
And then turning over her medical records to Dr. Abel.
In the 9 years that you've been experimenting on living, feeling brains,
17 of your patients have been irreversibly warped.
And she says she makes a mean sheep's trotter.
I'll tell Mrs. Van Houten you were concerned about her affairs. She'll be aroused. We must have dinner sometime.
Not likely, Caligari.
Don't you want to sample my culinary prowess?
I can't picture you.
In the kitchen.
I make a mean sheep trotter. The secret is finding sheep like you.
Yeah, and right after that, when the kids are eating dinner with Dr. Aval, and they're
Not Dr.
eating.
Evil.
Yes, they're eating what it looks like they're eating it like corn on the cob.
Yes,
And
they keep referring to sheep's trotters, which in the context of this movie are literally just like the legs of a sheep with the wool still on.
Yeah.
Call me sentimental. When I see a fresh sheep trotter, I can't help but think there is a God.
And they're eating what comes across as corn on the cob until they zoom in on it and they reach for the butter, and in the butter dish is a pair of hair clippers. And take a little off the top. And they start buzzing the hair off.
Yeah, they have wool and hooves and everything.
It's awful and great.
Oh, it's amazing. It's just so, the whole thing is so disorienting, and the way Dr. Aval is eating it with such gusto. I feel like that's how Fox Harris eats in real life. But it's amazing. After this experience, Eleanor has a nightmare and decides she has to go off to the asylum. I'm sorry, not Eleanor. Ramona has a nightmare, decides she has to go off to the asylum.
Sits up, immediately lights a cigarette, which is magically right there and ready, and then hands it to her husband.
Well, no, she lights. Does she light two at a time?
No, she actually.
Or does she light a second?
She lit one, handed it to him, and then sat there with one that's unlit herself, and I believe tried to take a drag off of it a couple of times, but had never lit it. Then took his back when he's like, "Oh, I don't have to go. I'm going back to sleep."
Right, because he goes back to sleep. Right, of course. Yeah. She had the foresight not to light her own cigarette for real.
Yep.
Well, they're a really good couple. They know each other's quirks and foibles.
And they can finish each other's sentences so well.
And she sneaks off and gets into that car with the sweet neon windows.
It was pretty great. And of course, takes
so
off
good.
like a bolt. Smacks your
It's
head
like
to the back of the seat.
It's like a music video in the best way.
But a quirky, twitchy, robotic music video.
Oh my God. It's so freaking weird. So at the asylum, now we're starting to get to the really good stuff. Where Caligari is preparing her main experiment. She has hooked up Mrs. Van Houten and Gus Pratt with little metal nozzles in their foreheads to make it easier for her to inject stuff. She's extracted fluid from their forebrains. So that she
pulmonary gland, I can't remember.
It's is it the pituitary gland?
Is it the pituitary gland down here?
Maybe it's the hypothalamus. Caligari says that she is planning to directly access the hypothalamus, according to my notes.
Fair enough.
So basically, she is planning to squirt Mrs. Van Houten and Mr. Pratt with each other's limbic juices.
This hype was brimming with fluid extracted from Mr. Pratt's hypothalamus. One plunge and splish, splash. Mr. Pratt's gland juice becomes Mrs. Van Houten's. Big fun with the autonomic nervous system.
And there's some pretty sweet effects where she injects them and their foreheads like swell up and it's all gross and their eyelids flutter. And then basically, now they're playing each other.
Yeah, I don't know where it is. That's definitely not where the hypothalamus is. She would have gone right up through somebody's nose to get into that fucker.
Well, she's not a great doctor.
Or is she?
Maybe she has revolutionary theories about the secret actual location of the hypothalamus.
Maybe she just calls it the hypothalamus.
I mean, where's she from? Like, maybe she just has maybe it's a language barrier thing. She has an accent.
She sure does pretend to.
I don't know what she actually is. So this Dr. Caligari is played by Madeleine Reynal, who, as far as I can see, only has one other credit ever in a sci-fi movie called Space Mutiny, which came out the year before this, and I have never seen that. I don't know anything about her. She's just a mystery figure. I like to imagine that she's exactly like Dr. Caligari, and that these are just her own clothes. I was trying to think of what the movie From Beyond is about.
It was the pineal gland.
Yeah, that's what it should have been.
That's the one that controls the lizard brain and everything.
Yeah, there's an awesome movie about it called From Beyond, starring Jeffrey Combs, my very favorite mad scientist.
I don't know anything about either of these things.
You will. Oh, you will.
That's what this is all about, Matt. Oh, we didn't even have a welcome back.
Well, I guess we'll have to pretend we didn't go anywhere.
Oh. We didn't go anywhere. We never had a break. This is still the Depot Devoid. I am Ted Fagan.
I'm still Matt Fagan. I don't know if I actually said that earlier.
Where's your
I was
fucking
also
ID?
Matt Fagan earlier. I've been at Matt Fagan the whole time.
Prove it. Show me your ID.
I can't. I left it in my other hypothalamus interfacing.
I got an Oregon Real ID.
What?
I had to re-up my driver's license, and now if you want to fly on airplanes, you have to have a real ID, or at least you're going to by the time the next 8 years goes up. So I paid $30 more for an ID that has an extra blurry picture of myself on it.
Huh.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that. I don't plan on going anywhere.
Yeah, I figured, within the next 8 years, I might fly on a plane, so I might as well just pay the extra $30 for it.
It seems really improbable to me.
Well, if I smear $30 over the course of 8 years, it's pretty small, so I figured it was acceptable.
I guess so. Fair enough.
I don't know if I'm flying anywhere, but maybe.
All right, where were we? Somewhere in an asylum?
Yeah, so
poking each other's pineal glands.
They were squirting juices into each other's juice holes, and then suddenly Eleanor wants to eat testicles, and
the melding of two psyches with a single glandular squirt.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, yeah, and then Dr. Abel walks in and sees the whole thing going on. He's like, oh, right, I guess my kids were right after all. She is fucking crazy.
Commingling bodily fluids. And Mr. Pratt, Mrs. Van Houten, they've okayed this?
Petty concerns. It's typical when brain history's in the making.
What you're saying is impossible. Why, you're defying the laws of reality.
This is the only reality, and I write the laws.
And then he got some forehead squirts and turned into Babs.
Dr. Caligari squirts him up with Mrs. Van Houten's juices, and he turns into like this fucked up Ethel Merman maniac called Babs.
Dad, I'm getting you out of here.
Babs, if you love me, you'll call me Babs.
Damn you, Dad, listen to me.
Babs.
All right.
That's my very special name.
And if you've ever wanted to see anything that perfectly encapsulates the idea of being sexual without being in any way erotic, watch Fox Harris in a blonde wig playing Babs. It is
Horrifying.
amazing. It can be both.
It is.
It's horror amazing.
There you go. Although somehow that sounds like it starts with a W instead of an H, and then it's even worse. But yeah, no.
Oh, it is so messed up. As much as I love Babs, the thing that Gus turns into, I love his whole bit. He has this incredible monologue in a padded cell with a couple of random silent sexy inmates where he is trying to come to terms with whatever it is that he is now, which is not Gus and not Eleanor. Seems to be maybe kind of more Eleanor than Gus. But it is he recognizes that he's in the wrong body and it's creating a problem. He refers to himself as beauty trapped inside of someone else, and the self that is looking out through his eyes does not recognize what's in the mirror. And he goes through this amazing monologue as these various tableaux form. It's beautiful and weird and sort of surprisingly thoughtful. Includes my favorite line in the movie, where Gus as Eleanor, or two psyches trapped in the same body, says,
"There are some states of being for which there is no name because the people who experience them do not come back. My skin has wrapped me in this gruesome mistake. I know you're watching me."
I fucking loved that line.
It's really good. And then he sets out to find his husband, who is somewhere else in the asylum. What's he gonna do? I don't know. Not really sure. Probably not anything great.
Yeah, but not what Eleanor did.
Well, I mean, the last time we saw the husband, he was dressed up in a weird Harlequin costume, imprisoned and forced to watch the experiment. This has not been a great day for Les Van Houten.
No, actually, the last time we saw him, daughter of
Ramona.
Babs. Yeah, Ramona opens the door and Eleanor is there, and she's got Les on a spit.
Oh, we've already seen. That's right. She cooks him. Forgot that it already happened.
She's cooking him over an open fire. Which is also really, really a lot of the stuff that's done in this is intentionally tacky. But she's turning the crank for the spit, and he's not moving.
Well, and she's also sort of turning it like an automaton. You know, she looks like one of those like dime store Santa figures. She looks like a robot. It's very, very bizarre to look at. But it's the second time that Les has been spit roasted today.
Well, and also he might have had his testicles cut off and cooked in orange juice or something.
That's true. I mean, there was a lot of talk of Rocky Mountain oysters. Has it been long enough, though, to prepare them the way that she described?
Well, I don't remember exactly how long it took, but I will point out that she was reading The Complete Joy of Cooking.
She was.
And
she's just like you and me, Ted.
It's a great book. And a door open, and there's another patient there with what appears to be two lumps that she's talking about. Oh, these are so complicated. And he's like, ah! So I'm pretty sure that he had his balls. I don't know. I have to watch this more to understand. And even when I do understand, I don't know if I'm going to understand.
It's a serious mindfuck. I mean, and what it becomes sort of about in the end is, I mean, there are various ways in which this movie examines the concept of identity, and it doesn't provide any easy resolutions, but it does provide some fringy explorations, and we have people wondering what makes them who they are, and if you take this thing that makes you you and you put it into someone else, are they themselves? Are they you? Are they a new third thing? And the movie, the closest thing the movie comes to resolution is Eleanor and Caligari essentially end up swapping places, where Eleanor traps her. They exchange fluids in the same way with the not they don't exchange fluids in a sexy lesbian way. They exchange it in a sexy pineal gland way, and then they reenact an earlier scene from the movie, but with swapped dialogue, and it's a. I find the conclusion very satisfying, but I'm not sure that it provides resolution.
I know you're watching me.
Of course. You're a fascinating woman. I wish to learn more about you.
There's much to be learned from a despairing shriek.
For instance?
That you can't trust doctors.
But you can trust love.
What do you want from me? I can't love.
Describe your life in 3 words or less.
Unending torment.
It doesn't, and there's also the one question for me is when it came to the exchange of fluids and the pineal gland there, it was Eleanor putting her own fluid into Dr. Caligari's pineal gland.
Yes.
But Eleanor was squirting Dr. Caligari's grandfather's juices into her own forehead.
That's right. Oh, we forgot to talk about that.
Because she got his brain in a bucket.
Right. There's a twist of sorts in that our Dr. Caligari is the granddaughter of the original Dr. Caligari from the movie The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is a little bit of a problem there, because in the context of that movie, the director of the asylum, who is ostensibly Caligari, has sort of engineered the events of the movie as an experiment, but he himself took the name Caligari from like an 18th century personage whose identity he borrowed. So I'm not sure what we're going with here. But anyway, it's probably, let's just not examine that. Our Dr. Caligari is the granddaughter of the original Dr. Caligari, who is now a brain in a jar, as if this were the man with 2 brains, and Dr. Caligari was Anne Melmahay. And her plan is to juice herself up with her grandfather's juices. And so, yeah, that would be how we get. So that's, yeah. Is it that exact syringe for sure that Eleanor injects into herself?
I mean, there wasn't another syringe.
I don't remember. I'll have to check. There's so many syringes. It's a hospital, Ted.
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, I guess
do you think? I mean, did she use the same syringe for all of them? Because she had to have extracted. I mean, in order to.
Well, and she dropped that one on the ground.
Gus and Eleanor up with each other. She had to extract fluid separately into 2 syringes first, and then swap. So she's got multiple syringes.
Yeah, but she dropped the one on the ground after Eleanor shoved that one in her head, and then Eleanor shoved another one in her own. So she wouldn't have turned into Caligari of any Caligarian form without having grabbed that one.
Well, also if Eleanor like extracted her own juice and shot it into Caligari, it would be Eleanor / Gus juice.
And nobody needs to start talking about juices of mooses and juices of gooses. But I mean, we're all up in the doctor.
What about sneeches on beaches?
Yeah, we're all up in the doctors right now.
Yeah, so there's a lot of swapping around
of juices.
Of juices and identities. Babs appears to be certainly not either Dr. Aval or Eleanor, but a distinct third thing who even immediately names herself. So what makes a person who they are?
That's one of the things that I mean, fairly early on in the film, and we are of course going to have to start wrapping this one up, but early on in the film, my impression was this isn't something that's actually taking place in a universe with multiple people. This is something about one person in and of themselves having a hard time wrapping their head around what their identity is and how far they're willing to go with different things, and they're ashamed of themselves in so many different ways and yet proud of themselves in other departments, which, I mean, stew enough to get rid of the body, that's the best way to go. But also like body shame and like, I mean, this is the thing that's okay with the church. We had
There's definitely a religious component to the director. It's worth mentioning him a little bit, since he made the movie. Steven Saadian, who is the designer and director and co-writer of Dr. Caligari, definitely went to Catholic school, and definitely had an adversarial relationship with nun authority, and acknowledges an erotic component to the way he responded to that. A lot of his early work, he was like the original art designer at Hustler magazine, in the very, very early days of Hustler, like before it sort of exploded. And
back in the early times of Larry Flint?
Yes, before Larry Flint was shot. He actually left Hustler because after Larry Flint was shot, the way that the magazine was run changed significantly. He had total creative freedom before, and then immediately following Larry getting shot, he had no creative freedom. And so he and John Russo, who is the co-writer of this movie, and another fellow left Hustler and formed their own production company. He has directed a couple of other movies, both of which are adult films. This is his only R-rated movie. But what's really interesting is that the adult films that he's directed, at least the two that I'm familiar with, are so clearly made by the same guy who made Dr. Caligari. They are not exactly erotic. Like if you were they're straight movies, and I'm not a straight person, so maybe I'm wrong, but my feeling at having seen these is that anyone who, for example, rented either Night Dreams or Cafe Flesh with the intention of going home and having a lovely time masturbating would probably have been really disappointed in what they were getting. At the very least, they would have been very surprised by what they were getting. A very famous scene from Night Dreams, for example, it involves basically a woman giving head to a man wearing a full, like the old-fashioned, you remember what the old cream of wheat box looked like with the yellow background and like the African-American chef with the chef's hat? Like, it was that, but like the full-on box, like with the Nabisco logo and everything.
With the Nabisco logo?
Yes, like, man, you can find this on YouTube with like the sexy parts blurred out and watch the whole scene. Like, it is a dude in a cream of wheat costume getting a blowjob from a woman while a slice of toast from the Wonder Bread bag on the counter has jumped down, turned into a man wearing a full slice of toast costume, who is serenading them with a saxophone while she gives head. It's like, what? Like, what is this? But it's kind of amazing.
That's funny. That's
and
fabulous.
I found these because Cafe Flesh, the poster for Dr. Caligari, the review, or not even review, like this, like the informative blurb on the front of the poster said, from the creators of Cafe Flesh, the cult film of the 80s. So I was like, well, I've got to see whatever this is. I didn't even know it was an adult film. It doesn't tell you that on the poster for Dr. Caligari. So I didn't find that until my freshman year of college. I called around, I moved to Portland for college. I called around to all these adult video stores until I found one that had Cafe Flesh somewhere on Burnside, went way down Burnside into west side of Portland, opened up an account at an adult video store so I could rent Cafe Flesh, and then I never went back again after I returned that movie. But it was amazing. It was just as fucking weird as Dr. Caligari, except with like occasional hardcore sex in it. But it was it was like a weird, it was science fiction, it was surreal, it was avant-garde, it was day glow nonsense. It was crazy and not like erotic, but fascinating.
That's good.
I would watch Cafe Flesh again.
I don't know. We might get there, but I'm not sure that's what we're recording about.
I mean, for the podcast, it's maybe not at the top of the list.
Yeah.
But just in terms of general interest, like weirdness, you know, it's definitely like the most like fascinating pornography I've ever seen. It's way better than Edward Penis Hands.
Well, you know, I'm still gonna stick with the greatest porn ever made was Orgasmo.
Is there an actual
movie.
porn version of that?
I don't care if there is. I'm sticking with the original. It's amazing. It's the best.
Yeah, I mean, it was good. I remember liking that. It's been a long time.
Can I call them the Naughty Twins? No, you can't call them the Naughty Twins. They're the ass fuck twins because they get fucked in the ass.
Ooh, just like Les Van Houten.
All right. Well,
so would you recommend this movie, Ted?
I think that I need to watch it one or two more times before I can conclude whether or not I would recommend it.
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to every single person I meet.
Yeah, no. Definitely not. I mean, at this point, I'm like, I might recommend it to somebody to tell me whether or not I should watch it.
I understand that. Yeah, it is. It's a baffling experience the first time through. I can't imagine what it would be like to see at 40 for the first time.
I'll tell you what, 16, I wouldn't recommend watching it with my son. It wouldn't be like, hey, Vincent,
see, I thought about that because your son is older than I was when I saw this movie. Like, so I thought about that. I was like, I wonder what would he think about that? Like,
I've just started letting him read The Boys.
If he knew, like, what would you think if Vincent just told you, "Oh, I watched Dr. Caligari. I saw you watched it the other day, and I thought I'd check it out." Like, what would you
probably
say?
Ask him if he needs a hug, a pat on the head, because it's weird.
So tell me this: how is this movie not as good as RoboCop?
I don't think that it is not as good as RoboCop. I think that it is definitely better than RoboCop in all ways.
Yeah, you know what? I have to agree. And in this one instance, there's no aspect of Dr. Caligari that is not as good as RoboCop.
And there's no part of RoboCop that's not as good as this.
It's an amazing confection. Why is this the most important movie of all time?
Literally because of the way that the daughter and son doctors would conclude and finish each other's sentences. They did it in such a beautiful way, and with the cigarette smoking and
Oh
them
my God,
blowing it
right?
out in the right way, they choreographed that in such an irritatingly beautiful way. Even in the spots where it's like, wait, no, they fucked that up, and then he's like, here's this puff of smoke that shouldn't have been
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Well,
Son
and,
of a
and that
bitch.
exquisite moment during the confrontation they have with Caligari, when the three of them share a word,
And
when
they
they turn to the
magically,
camera and say the word warped. It's just,
yep.
I love it. It's so contrived, but so to me, the importance of this movie lies in, it it fascinated me more than almost any other movie at the time. It was because there are a lot of other things that were sort of crazy or out there, and I was always seeking out that sort of thing. But I feel like Dr. Caligari is one where, to me, the influences were not there. Like I couldn't look at this and say, oh, I see how you got to this place. It was just like I just skipped over a bunch of stuff and landed there. And it was like, I don't know where I am, but I love it. And
Right.
I had not had that particular experience before. And there's really been nothing since that gave me this little jolt in the same way. It is an utterly unique experience.
It's pretty amazing. And it's work to get through. And I really like it. And I do think that I need to see it a few more times. But
It requires you to fall into its rhythm. It's probably a really hard one to watch a little bit and then walk away and then pick it up again and watch another 10.
I had to
if
do
you,
that.
right, exactly. And that's not, I imagine, the ideal way, because that first like 15 minutes, it is weirdly off-putting, but also like it's kind of there's no dialogue, and I think it works almost like a lullaby, and it just sort of pulls you in. It shows you the types of images you're going to see. It gives you just these little tastes, and I feel like if you just kind of go with it, like by the time the story starts unfolding, you're already in there. And I've got to imagine that there's also, because this is like pornography at this point is fairly easy to find, but it's probably not easy for like a 17-year-old boy to find. And I am certain that there are people in my age group at the time that I saw it who watched it initially for the promise of tits. And so they give you a bunch of them like right at the beginning. And then sort of, I think by the time you get past like the main titty part, you're either on board or you're not. And
and they
if all
take
you
them
came
away.
for was tits, well, right. And if all you came for was tits, you're just going to leave. But I think there's probably a certain number of that audience who came for the tits and found something new and were really into it.
No, and
I didn't come for the tits, but I really love what I found.
Well, and once you get beyond them and they become less frequent, it gets ever so twisted. It's neat. It's
so
weird.
Twisted.
So I've got one final question for you about this movie.
Okay.
How did Papa feel?
What Ted is asking is, at the time that I watched this movie for the first time, my brothers and mother had moved away. I was finishing high school back home living with my grandfather. And so, yeah, I feel like I deliberately made an effort to watch this movie after he went to bed. There are some stuff I would watch horror movies where he would just leave. But I feel like this is one that I specifically spared him from because he would not have known what to make of this. Like, I would make him sit through the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but I wouldn't make him sit through Dr. Caligari. Papa
This
didn't
might have been
need
one
to
where
try
he would have gone to
understand.
mow the lawn or do some work
Yeah, he would.
downstairs with a
I am sure
bandsaw.
he would not. He would not have stayed around for the duration of the movie. But I don't think I ever even made him watch the beginning. And if I did, I'm sure that, like, if it was like, I don't remember the first time. But I feel like if I had started it and he was there, it would have been pretty clear pretty quickly that I should save it for later.
Yeah.
That's another like the gift of the tits up front. That it tells you, don't watch this with Papa.
Don't let Grandpa see this. Stop and be like, sorry. I'll set it aside.
Yeah, it's not a Papa movie.
No. I once rented it when I was 12. And I started that, and that was a 2 VHS tape movie.
Right, yeah.
And
oh yeah. That was epic.
Yeah, I think that I was halfway through the first tape when he stood up and said, I will never take you to the video store to rent a movie again. And he left.
That's a TV movie.
I know, but it was not okay. It was too bad for him.
Oh my Lord. Imagine if he had seen Hellraiser 2.
Yeah, it's a thing. That guy, I miss him.
Yeah, wow. I did not, wow, wow.
Yeah, halfway through tape 1, that was too much. Honestly, I don't even remember that movie very well. I only saw it the one time.
It was on TV in like 1990. Like it's not that intense.
Well, I mean, I was 12, so that was 1994, 95. But he was done. He was over it.
Maybe he became even more conservative because I made him sit through the Rocky Horror Picture Show so many times.
I don't know. I think he was probably better for himself on that one. But that was just a rough one. I think that he was a little bit rattled up from having been moved across the state.
Yeah,
Shoved into a new environment. Then his littlest grandson's like, "Let me rent this movie, Papa."
Well, he didn't have to watch it.
Well, we watched everything together. We were a little family in a tiny shit apartment. There was Mom and me living in the living room, and Ian in one of the bedrooms, and Papa in the other. It was a crammed up little apartment.
Sounds great.
It was different. But anyway, I'm gonna have to get going. I gotta clear the computer so that Emily can take the computer and do the things.
Okay. Well, then closing, Dr. Caligari, 1989, currently available in its entirety on YouTube for free if you want to look for it. It is absolutely worth checking out. It is one of the weirdest things you'll ever see. You will have to sign in because it's got boobs and it won't let you just look at boobs for no reason. Like, you have to tell it, like,
It also has a tongue that turns into a dick.
Well, it's more of a dick that turns into a tongue, really.
Well, I mean, it was a tongue that started out and then she started blowing it.
Well, yeah. Well, and then it turns into a bigger tongue.
Yeah. God, this is a great way to end this episode.
It's so good. Everybody, hide some secret needles in your pokey globes and pop on some Dr. Caligari. All I gotta say is I'm a juice dog and you won't let me shiver.
This movie,
I love you, Ted.
I love you too. This movie's worth it. It's rough, but it's
I'm not
worth
sorry
it.
I made you watch it.
I'm not either, but God damn it, man. Sometimes it gets real weird, and I appreciate those times.
So weird.
This is so good.
All right, everybody, watch Dr. Caligari.
Watch it 5 times. Then you might get it.
I'll expect to hear a book report in the morning.
All right. I love you, Matt.
Love you, Ted. Have a great night.
You as well.
Depot Devoid is hosted by Matt Fagan and Ted Fagan. Depot Devoid is not hosted by Ian Fagan because he died and we miss him. Reach us at depotdevoidpodcast@gmail.com. Dr. Caligari was written by Stephen Sayadian and Jerry Stahl. Directed by Stephen Sayadian, with music by Mitchell Froome.